Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Now today we gonna be taking a deep dive into one of the scariest things that humans could ever hear. So if you have sensitive ears, maybe stay away from this video or put your headphones down a little bit, because we're going to be talking about the forgotten horror of lost sound frequencies. The 19 Hz frequency, for example, which is a very low rumble, has been rumored to not only make people extremely uneasy, but also break their minds. And while there are some myths surrounding the dangers of different frequencies, like for example the brown note or the 396 Hz frequency, there are some frequencies out there that sound downright scary, especially when you learn about the experiments that have been conducted with them in the past. So let's start off with the 19 Hz frequency first. This was a test conducted by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation in the 1960s, where they sent out a radio broadcast on a station that was tuned to just 19 Hz. Now most radios are made to pick up between around 530 Hz, all the way to around 16,000 Hz. Anything lower than that or higher than that is usually outside the range of what the average human ear can detect. But the radio broadcast actually picked up an extremely low rumble. It sounded something like this. They played it at various times throughout the day and night to see how many people would call in and report hearing it. And many people did say that they were able to pick up the sound. In fact, out of the hundreds of calls that they got in response to the experiment, over half of them said that they heard the tone, even though it should have been outside the range of human hearing. This led researchers to conclude that either the radio waves were actually able to produce sounds below the range of human hearing, or that people in the area were picking up a subliminal message being sent to them. The latter is much more interesting, but there is absolutely no proof that any sort of subliminal messages were actually being sent to people with this frequency. However, when other tests were conducted by other media outlets across Canada, it seemed to show varying degrees of success. Some people reported hearing it, others didn't. It was impossible to pick up until you got it just right. And then once you did, it produced a feeling of dread and uneasiness. Many people who heard it reported that they had no idea how they heard it, but it was definitely inside their heads. Either way, the mystery still remains. What exactly did those people hear? Was it a subliminal message being sent to them through their radios? Or does this prove that humans can hear sounds below 20 Hz? Moving on, we have something known as the siren call, or the siren frequency. And it has less to do with a particular frequency, and more to do with the psychological effect of hearing something that you know is you and quite right. You may not know exactly what it is, but you know it's wrong. You know it's scary. And the fear that it brings up within you is the true horror behind this phenomenon. Sirens use a range of frequencies to attract their prey, and so naturally, scientists wanted to try and figure out which exact frequencies they used, and if there was any particular ones that drew the most attention. In 1998, two marine biologists named Aaron Rice and Paul Montgomery worked together on an experiment trying to determine the exact frequency that brought in the most fish to a lure. Using 6 speakers placed around a circular-shaped coral reef, they emitted different tones in succession and tested the results. While they discovered that the siren call wasn't a single frequency, but rather a combination of many, they found that the most effective call consisted of 3 frequencies: 75 Hz, 150 Hz, and 500 Hz. When combined, these frequencies created a sound similar to a whale's call, which is why it's also sometimes referred to as the whale song. While this may sound pretty cool, it definitely has a creepy vibe to it. And that was confirmed in 2004 when a marine biologist named Kate Stafford repeated Rice and Montgomery's experiment, but instead used a recording of a real, distressed call from a humpback whale. She found that this produced the greatest results, bringing in the most fish to their lures. So not only does this sound creepy, but it's also potentially dangerous to anyone that hears it. But moving on from that, we have probably the most famous, yet least factual, urban legend in terms of forbidden frequencies. And that is the 396 Hz frequency. Not only is it rumored to unlock the third eye and activate psychic abilities, but it's also said to cure depression. There's even some evidence out there claiming that this frequency can make people levitate, and that's where the term the elevator music of the devil comes from. Well, if you've seen my previous video on the Mozart effect, you'll know that there's no such thing as miracle frequencies. While there are certain frequencies that can trigger certain feelings, like for example, binaural beats, there's nothing really magical about the 396 Hz frequency. But even so, it still has a slightly creepy vibe to it. Now, I've already talked about this in my video on the Devil's Note, but I'm going to bring it up again here since it kind of fits. It's an extremely low pitch that has been rumored to drive people insane. The exact frequency is unknown, hence why it's called the brown note, since we don't know what the actual frequency is. But it's estimated to be somewhere around 7 Hz. Some say it's anywhere between 5 and 15 Hz. The main reason that people believe this exists is because of the phenomena known as infrasound. Refers to any sound that has a frequency below the range of human hearing. We typically can hear between 20 Hz and 20 kHz, although some people can hear slightly above or below that. Anything lower than 20 Hz is considered infrasound and can produce certain feelings within humans. For example, the feeling of dread that I mentioned before with a 19 Hz frequency is similar to the feelings that can be brought on by infrasound. Has also been known to produce feelings of anxiety, unease, and it can even induce nausea. The worst part about it is that infrasound is completely undetectable by the human ear. So whatever it is that you're hearing, you won't even know where it's coming from. There have been countless reports of people hearing sounds that aren't there, especially within hospitals, schools, hotels, and offices. And each time the source of the sound could never be found. While this isn't exactly the same as the brown note, it's definitely related. Next, we have a sound frequency that might not be the scariest thing to hear, but the implications of it are terrifying, and it's often referenced in sci-fi movies. I'm talking about the death ray. The death ray is a particle beam weapon that was supposedly invented by German physicist and electrical engineer Nikola Tesla, although he never actually built one. The death ray was theorized to be able to destroy entire aircraft from miles away. There was actually a patent filed for it in 1926, but it was never approved. And Tesla himself was heavily ridiculed for even suggesting something like this was possible. But the death ray doesn't stop there. It's been theorized that if a death ray was actually to exist, it would emit a sound frequency that could literally burn a hole in your skull. While this is obviously just a theory, and again, there's no proof that the death ray even exists. If something like this was possible, you wouldn't even need to worry about an alien invasion. Humans would find a way to destroy themselves long before that. Luckily, the death ray is just a theory, although the government did actually try and build something like it during World War II with a project known as Project X-ray, but they weren't successful, and it was abandoned after the war ended. Finally, we have the sound that's so scary it'll kill you. Wait, what? Yeah, I'm serious. There is a certain sound that will literally kill you. It's called the singing, ringing death, and it gets its name from the symptoms that people experience when they hear it. If you hear this sound, you will begin to feel a ringing in your ears followed by a loss of balance, disorientation, and eventually your heart will stop beating. You might be wondering, is this a frequency that hasn't been discovered yet? Maybe something extremely high or extremely low? No. The singing, ringing death is actually an extremely loud sound, and it's not a constant sound. It happens in bursts. In fact, the singing, ringing death is caused by a weather phenomenon known as a tornado, and it was discovered accidentally in the early 1990s when Oklahoma was hit by a series of deadly tornadoes. Researchers were listening to weather reports of what people heard when the tornadoes passed overhead, and one man in particular described it as the loudest sound I've ever heard, like a freight train or a jet engine. But it was a continuous roar, and then all of a sudden it changed to a weird ringing sound. That's when the man lost his hearing. And it turned out that this was a fairly common occurrence with tornadoes. It's now known that tornadoes produce an extremely loud roaring noise in the middle of the funnel, and this sound can literally kill you. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.